if you've been applying to job postings on LinkedIn and you're feeling stuck or like your applications aren't going anywhere, it's not because you're unqualified or doing something wrong. It's because the system that you're using was never really designed for you in the first place. This might sound a bit harsh, but once you see how hiring actually happens and how it actually works behind the scenes, it starts to make a lot more sense. What I want to do in this video is walk you through what's going on behind the scenes before a job ever shows up on LinkedIn, and why people who quietly understand what's actually happening get hired without even submitting a resume or application at all. Before I get into it, let me first guess what your job search currently looks like. So you probably spent hours tweaking your resume, maybe rewriting the same bullet points over and over again because you're told that every application needs to be tailored. You've written cover letters that no one ever acknowledges, you've applied to dozens of roles and maybe even more than 100. But every time you hit submit, there's this relief, like you actually did something. But then some time passes and nothing ever happens, right? You don't get a reply, you don't get any feedback. Sometimes you don't even get a rejection at all. You just get silence. So you keep going because everybody around you keeps repeating the same advice. Apply to more jobs, treat it like a numbers game, and eventually something will happen, right? But here's the part that I think people miss and no one really explains to you, especially if you're young. Applying to jobs is mostly productivity theater. It feels concrete, it feels measurable, it feels like you're taking action, and it really gives you something to point to when someone asks you how the job search is going, but it doesn't really move you any closer to being in front of an actual decision maker or making any progress. In reality, the average corporate job that gets posted on LinkedIn gets over 500 resumes, and most of them within a couple hours. So only a handful of people ever really get interviewed out of these hundreds and thousands of applications, and then one person eventually gets hired, right? So this means that the overwhelming majority of applicants were never really even seriously considered in the first place, even if they are the best fit for the job. And by the time you see a job posting available publicly to you, you're already late, and there's probably likely already a short list of candidates that a recruiter already has. So to understand why this happens, you have to really look at how hiring starts and works inside a company. It usually begins with the team feeling stretched. People are overworked on a team, things start slipping, and the manager realizes that they need some sort of help. At this point, the urgency is very real, but nothing is really formal yet. Some time passes, and eventually the manager will start making it official. They'll start talking internally, setting up meetings, getting budget for an approval, and maybe loop in someone from finance, HR, or leadership to discuss the hire. Now, some more time passes, and this is the part that most people never really see. So before any recruiter is involved or the job posting is even public, the manager will start asking around their personal network. They'll ask their team if they know anybody. They'll reach out to former colleagues. They'll post something on their personal LinkedIns. And this is kind of where 50% of roles quietly get filled before the job is even available to you. It gets filled through existing network. And only if this doesn't work, if they can't find somebody through casually asking around, then the role gets passed to a recruiter. And then even then, it can sit in the recruiter's desks for weeks while priorities are shifting and details are getting sorted out. So eventually, some more time passes. This could be weeks later or even months later. And now you see the job on LinkedIn. So what you're really seeing on LinkedIn is the final stage of a process that's been unfolding for weeks, maybe even months. And by now, the time you're seeing this, a company usually already has spoken to the people that they trust, and sometimes they might even have a short list, right? So when you apply, you're not even entering a fair competition. You're showing up after the real search has already happened. So most people call this the steps that happen before a job gets posted on LinkedIn, the hidden job market. It's not really hidden if you're being proactive. Most people are just looking in the wrong places and doing the wrong things, right? You're responding to postings while other people who kind of understand this system are finding roles before they're even posted. So let me give you a concrete example of how this actually played out. A few months ago, someone reached out to me who had just graduated with a finance degree. He had a solid resume and plenty of experience, was doing exactly what you're probably doing and what most people do, frankly, applying to analyst roles and entry-level roles on LinkedIn, one after another, and getting no responses. When he approached me, I first told him to stop doing this and just try something different. We picked a single company, a mid-sized investment firm that had recently raised a new fund. There was no job posting and there was no real public signal that they were hiring, other than a hunch that they might be on the hunt because they announced a new fund. He found the VP who actually runs the team and sent a short message, right? There was no resume attached, there was no formal pitch, there was no questions about a job, just a genuine question about how the firm thought in a specific sector that they were investing in. The VP responded because the email was great. They set up a call, they talked about the work, about deals, about how the firm evaluated opportunities, and at one point, the conversation naturally turned to a live investment the team was looking at. And the student casually shared how he'd think about it. After the call, he followed up with a few more thoughts over email on the market, on the deal that they discussed, and pitched a couple of ideas. A few weeks went by, and later the VP asked if he was interested in interviewing for a junior role, right? So he got the offer without ever applying, without ever sending a resume, without actually ever doing anything other than already having a pre-existing relationship built with somebody at the firm that could actually make decisions. Now, this approach isn't easy, right? Reaching out to these senior people who are experienced can feel really uncomfortable and nerve-wracking, and these conversations require a decent amount of preparation. And the worst part is there's no guaranteed outcome, and it definitely takes more effort than clicking apply while you're sitting in your pajamas watching Netflix or something. But here's the thing, you're already putting in the effort, you're just putting it into a system and format that filters you out by default. So the choice in thinking isn't really between easy or hard per se, it's between spending your time on work that feels productive but goes nowhere, which is applying to jobs, or spending that same energy and time on conversations that actually move you closer to decision makers. When you do this right, you're no longer competing with hundreds of applications, right? You're one of a small number of people the hiring manager is actually talking to before the role ever becomes public. If you want something concrete to act on, here's a pretty simple framework. First, start by identifying 10 companies you're genuinely interested in. Not job postings, but just companies in general. Look for signals that could suggest growth or change, like new funding, new initiatives, or expanding teams. Then, for each company, find one person who actually runs the team that you'd want to join. This is not an HR person. This is not a recruiter. This is not somebody random at the firm. It's somebody who actually is a decision maker and has power to hire somebody and push somebody through. Spend a bit of time understanding what they actually work on, what their team does, and what they care about personally. Reach out to this person with a short, personalized message that's really about learning and curiosity and not about a job. So you want to ask thoughtful questions when you get the chance to talk to them and look for ways to add value in however you can. This could be as simple as sharing a news article, sharing an idea, or simply showing that you've done your homework and you really understand the company, the role, and themselves. If you do this a few times, you'll start to understand how the system actually works and you'll start to develop a network. If the person that you talk to doesn't have a job for you, but their friend is hiring, they will refer you. This is just kind of how the world works. If you make a good impression on somebody who's in a position of power, who has decision-making authority, they will remember you and they will pass you along to opportunities in their networks. So by reaching out to one person and getting to know them, you're not necessarily just networking with them, you're indirectly networking with their entire community and their entire world. So the biggest shift here is mental, right? You need to stop treating your job search like a numbers game where you just submit applications and hope that something sticks. You need to start treating it like relationship building, right? The goal is to really get into a room before the competition even know that the room exists. The job market isn't as random as it feels, but it feels broken and it feels random if you're just blindly applying. Most people don't have any idea of how this actually works, so they're just really playing it from the wrong side. Can't blame yourselves, you can't blame them. I was doing that as well until I learned how all of this works. If you want more breakdowns like this, I write a weekly newsletter called Future Proof where I share practical ideas and uncover insights and how the world really works. The link is below. Thanks for watching.